Hi, my name is Dreamsicle. I am talking again about perspective, scale, scope, and art ideas and how we can use them to better create pieces of media. This time, I am actually in Blender to talk about how we can apply those ideas of scope and perspective into our pieces to make something like this. Um, I picked up part of this technique from Ian Hubert and Max Hay, who are both really popular tutorialists for Blender. I am a really big fan of both of them and the way that they describe their creation processes because a lot of the techniques they provide are applicable to any kind of situation. But I want to delve more into how their techniques can be applied, not only in their specific showcases, but how anyone can use their famous technique to create digital art, even if they don't have any experience modeling, doing graphic design, that kind of thing. This is kind of easy and open source way to make your own digital and 3D art. And this piece here is a good example of it. So what is the secret technique? When I open up the material settings for the objects, in reality, the scene is really, really simple. Even though the viewport has a bunch of stuff in it, it's only a few core elements that paint the whole scene. It is a the moths, the grass, the trees, the water, the rocks, and the sky behind all of that. So how did I achieve this render with so few effects? If I click on my sky material, it's just an image from Pexels that I imported into Blender. And by putting it into the emission and base color, it mimics the real world lighting of the photo itself in the render. That's partially because I'm using Cycles, which is like a render engine inside of Blender, but I'm pretty sure Eevee in the newest versions of Blender also has this option included to make emissive objects. So the core principle behind this technique is essentially billboarding. Rather than using 3D models to build out a scene, we can take 2D assets like transparent videos or video images of nature and construct that with the relationship to the camera to draft a scene that looks 3D when in reality it's just layers of 3D images and layers of 2D images and the camera moving forwards. So artists can use perspective tricks like parallax or even just basic composition skills to set up their camera so that it's not in frame of the edges of our image. So on the sides of the actual render, if I turn on the viewport shading, it's just a flat plane with a sky background. It's not even a 3D object or some fancy sky texture. I just went to Pexels, which is a free and open source website. I made a plane, which is as easy as going to add, mesh, plane, and then in the settings, I just attached the image of the sky to the base color and the color in the emission slot. Max Hay goes over this in his tutorial on really beautiful skies. Highly recommend you check it out if you want to see some more nifty things you can do with camera positioning. But I want to talk more about this technique because it's not only limited to blocking out objects like in Ian Hubert's tutorial or making beautiful skies like in Max Hayes' tutorial, but this technique can be applied to any kind of 2D media. So you could take the image of a sky and use it as a sky. You could take an image of a forest and use it as the backdrop for a forest. Why spend time modeling every single leaf when you could go outside and just take a picture of your backyard or a piece of nature that you like? A similar kind of property applies with like photo scanning images, but oftentimes photo scans don't capture the level of detail we desire. The great thing about 2D photos is the resolution is much higher, and just by positioning your camera properly, you can achieve the effect without having to take 50 to 60 photos trying to photo scan something. Or if the object is too large and not possible to photo scan, then you can just use an image off of Google or some copyright-free site to do the job for you. After Effects and Premiere often do this in videos with parallax or in creating like 3D scenes by creating multiple layered objects. But because we are in a 3D space in Blender, we can just position the camera to be always facing our canvases, our billboards. And because of that, it evokes the same imagery as if it was in 3D. So as long as my scene, my timeline, doesn't have the camera moving in a way that breaks this illusion, I can always create complicated 3D scenes with 2D images. And you could break this down, especially if you're already a traditional artist, on a more fundamental level. So for example, I could draw the grass in the scene and then layer it in with the grass here, or just use the drawn image to represent all of this stuff here and layer it the same way. The moths in this scene, those glowing orbs, aren't even 3D objects. It's the same principle applied. So if I go to the shader editor, it's just a video of moths flickering around a black or transparent screen. And then these nodes here make it so that it's not a colored canvas. So if I take this one out, you'll see that it's just a black background because there is no background on this video. And because of that, I can just layer it in as a 3D element. So in practice, anyone can grab images, videos that they take in real life or ones that they make and bring them into Blender with this billboarding technique. Ian Hubert goes into an even more advanced version of this, where you can go into edit mode for an object and physically shape the texture, like your sky or your forest, around the object to better capture that depth. So if I was a good traditional artist and I already could draw cool patterns with parallax or with good perspective ideas, I could bring that into Blender and simply move the camera forwards or backwards to create that 3D feel without having to learn After Effects or any composition techniques in a 3D program. I think that this is a fundamental shift in the way that you create compositions in 3D art programs, because every tutorial brutally beats into you that you need to be an excellent modeler to do 3D art. You need to spend so much time modeling everything to perfection, but you can take advantage of the 3D space with 2D assets and not have to stress as much about how you're going to model or simulate every single concept in your piece. Instead, you can just take real world elements, things you've drawn, any 2D assets that you can upload and make transparent. You can bring them into Blender and then use that for your scene. And I think that in creating art this way, you can focus on modeling and detailing the things that actually matter in your composition, which gives you more freedom to control the scene itself. And I also think that oftentimes when we first get into modeling programs and we spend so much time trying to render out these complicated models, we lose a lot of time during the day and in our minds on how to make good production. But with using 2D assets, I can render this out. They're just flat canvases, so there's not really a lot of model to actually detail. It only takes a few minutes to render this out and see what looks good, see how I can change the composition or make things better. So for example, I'm not going to let this finish rendering. I just wanted to show you how fast this renders. I can go to my images for my sky and change it to create a new background. So let's add in a new image texture. I'll drag it, I'll find an image that I like. So I'm gonna move this over really quick. I want an image of a forest. So I can drag that in, go to base color, go to emission, and if I position this sky properly now, So let's lift it up in the Z. It's probably gonna have to go a little higher. I've now changed the scene entirely just by changing a single image, and I didn't have to remodel or reanimate or change anything. So if I now take this shrub out, I can quickly just swap in models or ideas without having to worry about how much time I spent on modeling something or what model will fit in my scene based on style or composition. But this billboarding technique expands beyond just skies or backgrounds. You can use this to basically make any of your 2D art a 3D asset. And I think that's really important.